Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. I am Mahmoud Rafian, a researcher at the Office of Islamic Studies on Cyberspace. The Office of Islamic Studies on Cyberspace was established in Qom in 2018 with the aim of strengthening the policy making of cyberspace based on Islam and the development of Islamic researchers on cyberspace. Cyberspace has transformed almost every aspect of our lives with the vast growth of new communication technologies. Many changes have taken place in societies. Therefore, knowing and understanding this space is essential for women and mothers who make up half of the population and are important members of family and society. According to the chapter Tahrim, the 66th surah of the Quran, Asiya, the great royal wife of the ancient Egypt's Pharaoh, and Maryam, the mother of Jesus Christ, have made great changes in history and society. So much so that God has made them role models for believing men and women. Therefore, the activity of Muslim women in society and cyberspace is essential. Ayatollah Khamenei said in this regard, there is no difference between men and women on many issues. Islam looks at men and women as human beings. Therefore, there is no difference between men and women on the issue of humanity, spiritual positions, and the many intellectual and scientific talents that they have. But they have two different modes. Each of these modes is shaped for a particular task. Of course, there are certain common tasks among them. The topic of today's meeting is Muslim women's activism in cyberspace. It should be noted that a valid certificate in English will be issued by the National Cyberspace Center for participants who provide a summary for us, a summary of this meeting in English, Arabic, or Persian. The summary should be sent to our Facebook account until 24 hours after the meeting. Our today's lecturer is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Dr. Sahar Khamis is an associate professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Maryland. Dr. Khamis is an expert of Arab and media and Muslim media and the former head of the Mass Communication and Information Science Department in Qatar University. She is a former Mellon Islamic Studies Innovative Visiting Professor at the University of Chicago as well. She is the co-author of the book Islam.com, and she wrote another books in this regard as well. Additionally, she authored and co-authored numerous books, book chapters, journals, articles, and conference papers regionally and internationally in both English and Arabic. I ask her, Dr. Khamis, to give her lecture. Thanks you, Dr. Khamis, for accepting our invitation. Please start.
Thank you so much, Brother Mahmoud. I really appreciate. Salam alaikum, everyone. And thanks to the Office of Islamic Studies on Cyberspace for the great work it's doing and also for this kind invitation. Let me start by saying that Brother Mahmoud was kind enough to interview me actually. And we had this interview about my work in the area of Islamic studies in cyberspace. And the interview was published in different languages. So that is a great. Thank you so much for that. And thanks again for the invitation. So I would like to start by saying that there are unfortunately a lot of stereotypes, a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of negative images about Islam and Muslims in general, and about Muslim women in particular. And now we have a very important tool in order to try to address some of these stereotypes and some of these negative misperceptions and negative images, which is the tool of cyberspace. We can now use the internet and we can use social media and digital media to try to correct some of these negative and false images and stereotypes about Islam and Muslims and about Muslim women in particular. So a lot of my work and research in this area dealt with Islamic discourses in cyberspace. As Brother Mahmoud mentioned, my first book, Islam.com, Contemporary Islamic Discourses in Cyberspace, was an attempt by myself and my co-author, Professor Muhammad Nawawi, to try to actually understand the dynamics in cyberspace that Muslims are engaging in, whether between themselves, like between Muslims and other Muslims, or between Muslims and non-Muslims. And from that also, my interest grew in the idea of Islamophobia and countering Islamophobia or fighting Islamophobia in cyberspace using social media and digital media. So a lot of my research in this area has also been dealing with the notion of Islamophobia and how to try to overcome it or to fight it in cyberspace. Other types of work I've been engaging in as well has been related to Muslim women's activism in cyberspace, which is going to be the topic of today's lecture. So I'm going to give a lecture, maybe 20, 30 minutes, and then after that, we can open the floor for questions and answers, whether from Brother Mahmoud to me or from any of the attendees and the guests to me as well. And please don't be shy to ask the question. You can ask in any language you like. And I'm sure we're going to get some help in terms of the translation. If you want to ask it in Persian, if you want to ask it in English, or if you want to ask it in Arabic, that is fine as well. So the idea of women in particular using social media and new media in order to try to overcome some of the images and stereotypes about them has been particularly very important for Muslim women in particular. There have been some efforts on the part of Muslim women to try to use cyberspace in a very effective way to try to counter or overcome some of the negative images and stereotypes against them. When the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, ran for, of course, they have different debates. They have a first debate, second debate, and third debate. What are you going to do about this problem of Islamophobia? And his answer was very strange. He said, I want you, as part of the Muslim community, when you see something, you have to say something. Of course, the answer means that basically Muslims are a suspicious group of people. They always are plotting against the regime or doing something against the government, or there is something dangerous going on. So Muslims, including Muslim women, started a campaign online, which is called hashtag Muslims Report Stuff. It was a very critical, very hilarious, very funny, but very critical also a campaign that was trying to make fun of this notion of see something, say something. So they started like, my mother cooks the same soup every day. I'm going to report her to the FBI. Hashtag Muslims Report Stuff. Or my brother does not clean his room. I'm going to report him to the authorities. Hashtag Muslims Report Stuff. They were trying to use humor and to be funny in terms of also making this very clear. This is a ridiculous message. When you see something, say something, because Muslims are just ordinary people like everyone else. And there is no reason for them to be seen as suspicious or dangerous or scary or different. In terms of Muslim women in particular, there was also an incident related to Donald Trump when there was this person, Mr. Khizr Khan, and his wife, Ms. Ghazala Khan. They were taking part in the Democratic National Convention. And they lost a son who was actually fighting in one of the wars. And, he was an American Muslim young man, and unfortunately, he died. So when the image of the young man was shown on a big screen, the mother was very emotional and she stood there, but she did not talk. So Donald Trump made a statement which is not only Islamophobic, but also sexist. And he said that, oh, look at this woman, Muslim woman, standing there on stage. She cannot even talk and she cannot speak. Maybe she is not even allowed to speak. Nobody allows her to speak. So it's a very stereotypical image, right? That Muslim women are suppressed, they don't talk, they don't speak, they don't have a voice, they don't participate. It's about the negative images and stereotypes I was talking about earlier. What did Muslim American women do? Muslim American women started a campaign online using social media and new media, which is called hashtag Can You Hear Us Now? Can you hear us now? And they started to use this hashtag on Twitter in order to say, we are not silent. We have our voices, and our voices should be heard, and our voices are loud and clear, and we have a message, right? We are active, we are participating in our societies. So they started to say, I'm a professor, for example, this one of the tweets, I'm a professor, and when I talk in the classroom, I'm the only one who is allowed to talk in the classroom. Hashtag, can you hear us now? Another woman said, I am an astronaut. I'm someone who works in, in actual space, right? She's an astronaut. I'm an astronaut and I actually travel. And nobody is able to tell me not to travel and not to travel in space and not to explore, the planets and other planets around us. I am an empowered Muslim woman. Hashtag, can you hear us now? And the tweets kept coming and coming and coming, and they went viral on social media. They became viral on Twitter. Hashtag, can you hear us now? It's all about Muslim women who are saying, you know what? We are not oppressed. We are not suppressed. We are not weak. We are not voiceless. We have a voice and we have a strong voice. Hashtag, can you hear us now? It was a very successful campaign to try to overcome these negative images and stereotypes and this kind of Islamophobia mixed with sexism. It is Islamophobic as well as sexist to think that Muslim women do not have a voice. And this lady I was talking about earlier, Ms. Ghazala Khan, she herself gave a media interview and she said, I am not silent. Nobody silenced me. I was just very emotional because I saw the image of my son on the big screen. And unfortunately, he died, he passed away. I was very emotional about that, about seeing my son's image on the screen. That's why I was not talking. But nobody was silencing me. Nobody was suppressing me. Nobody was telling me to shut up or not to speak. So that was one successful campaign as well that Muslim women started. Another very successful campaign as well that was started by Muslim women internationally and more recently was called hashtag hands off my hijab. So unfortunately, I'm sure many of you know about the Islamophobia, the horrible Islamophobia in France, which is very ironic because France has been, priding itself for being this nation of liberté, égalité, fraternité, right? Like liberty, egalitarianism, and fraternity, brotherhood, and we're all, brothers and sisters. We should have liberty and egalitarianism, equality. But unfortunately, the policies of the French government have been very different. They have been very discriminatory, I must say, against Islam and Muslims in particular, in a very sad way and a very shocking way, right? There isn't a lot of tolerance for religious diversity or religious freedom. And it gets much worse for Muslim women in particular, especially women who are wearing the headscarf or the hijab, like myself and like many women, millions and millions of women around the world. There isn't a lot of tolerance for the right to wear the hijab. In fact, they become targets. They become targets for governmental criticism and governmental policies that, sometimes even in some cases prohibit wearing the niqab, of course, being the face veil, as you know, wearing the niqab or wearing the hijab becomes restricted or becomes prohibited by law, which is, of course, a violation of human rights and violations of choice, right? So the choice should not just be the choice of a woman to wear a bikini or to wear, a short skirt. What about the woman's right to wear a niqab or to wear a hijab if she wants to do so? Why isn't this also seen as freedom? Why isn't this respected as freedom? So Muslim women started a campaign online, which is called hashtag hands off my hijab. Hands off my hijab. In other words, don't touch my hijab and don't ask me to take it off. That is not your right to interfere in my right as a Muslim woman to decide to wear the hijab. It should be protected and you should not try to take this right away from me. And again, that was a very successful campaign. It went viral on social media and it became very, very widespread and very popular. And people started to tweet and retweet hands off my hijab, hashtag hands off my hijab. So that's another example also of Muslim women using social media and new media for the purpose of raising their voices, right? And I always say, whenever women are doing that, whenever they're engaging in this kind of activism, that in itself fights and overcomes the negative stereotypes and the negative images about Muslim women being silent and not being able to speak for themselves. So it is really giving them a platform for voice. Now, the internet is very important for everyone nowadays, especially nowadays. And as we all know, the younger generation in particular, they're spending many, many hours on the internet and on social media. But I believe the internet is especially even more important in the case of women in particular and Muslim women in particular, because let's face it, in many parts of the Muslim world, there are still traditional conservative societies, maybe rural communities, Bedouin communities, faraway communities, where women are not allowed to really be part maybe of the public space or the public sphere in a way which is equal to men, right? So therefore, using these important tools of communication and tools of digital media and social media Twitter and blogs and Facebook and so on, they're able to actually raise their voices and they're able to reach out to the rest of the world in very effective ways. We have seen that, for example, in the middle of the or the midst of the Arab Spring uprisings, when we have seen, Muslim women from different countries, saying no to dictators or raising their voices also for the realm of social change and political change in their own countries. And when I interviewed some of these Muslim women, they said, if it was not for the internet, if it was not for social media, if it was not for digital media, it would be very hard for me to actually raise my voice and to actually reach an international and a global audience as well. I am an activist, I am a journalist, I am a writer. If it was not for social media and new media, it would be very hard for me to reach an international, diverse, global audience. So sometimes when women in particular are suffering from certain types of restrictions or certain types of barriers in their everyday life because of social constraints, because of traditions, because of certain societal barriers, right? The internet becomes an important window. As one woman told me, it's a window through which they can see the rest of the world and also be seen by the rest of the world at the same time. So it works both ways, right? You can see the rest of the world and allow the rest of the world to also see you at the same time. That is particularly more important in the case of Muslim women. When it comes to even understandings of Islam, right, there are now women scholars, right, who are starting to interpret the Quran. They try to engage, for example, in ijtihad, right, in interpretation of certain religious texts or religious content, and to also say, we are not just scholars, we are Muslim women scholars, and we are engaging with religious texts, and we're trying to provide our own understandings of our own faith and our own religion. And some of them have been successful in that regard, and I think we need to see more of this effort. Having said all of that, the internet is not magic. And digital media is not a magical tool, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to have the internet tomorrow morning, everything is going to be great. We're going to have democracy, freedom, human rights, women's rights, equality. It's not like that, of course. The internet is just one tool, right? And we have to see it like that. It's just one tool among many. What about the rest of the other, components? There is definitely a need for more education, better education, more awareness, more societal work, more change of the societal mindset, right? Like some of the communities that still, for example, that's very sad. In some parts of Pakistan, some parts of the Muslim world, there are still rural communities that up till this moment fight women's education. I know this is not a problem in Iran because I've been to Iran before in a conference. And I know that women are highly educated. I've seen women in different positions and different ranks, really. And many of them were working in universities, professors, which is like great. I think this is very good. But it's not the reality in every part of the Muslim world, the 1.8 billion Muslims around the world, unfortunately. Because in some parts of the Muslim world, let's face it, up till this moment, there are still some rural communities and some faraway communities that are still resisting the idea of women's education or women's work in the workplace or joining the workforce and so on. So the social media is important. Social media is vital. It can be used in so many different ways. So many successful campaigns have been already started, and many more should also start soon, inshallah. But it's not magical tool, and it cannot bring about change or democracy or freedom or transformation or human rights or women's rights all by itself. You need to have a collective effort. You need to have good educational system, good resources, good understanding of women's issues, different parts of society collaborating and cooperating together to try to bring about this kind of a positive change. Otherwise, the internet alone cannot be a magical tool, and it cannot bring about this change all by itself. All right, so I think I'll stop here. And inshallah, if you have any questions, as I said, don't hesitate to ask any question you like, and I'd be happy to answer it in whichever language you want to ask it in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is a question, Dr. Khamis, and you mentioned in your speech, what were the effects of September 11 terrorist attacks on Muslim women's activities in cyberspace?
Oh, yes.
How do you assess and evaluate the activities of Muslim women after 11 terrorist attack?
Yes,
September
thank you for
11th.
the question. Yes, of course. September 11th, of course, as we all know, had a huge impact in terms of, yes, September 11th had a huge impact on unfortunately, the image and the stereotypes of Islam and Muslims in the West in general and in the United States in particular. So there was a big increase in the level of Islamophobia, even attacks on mosques, attacks on Islamic centers, attacks on Muslim women wearing the hijab like myself. Unfortunately, some Muslim women even had to take off the hijab because they were subjected to verbal and sometimes physical attacks and harassment, and it was horrible. At that time, unfortunately, the internet was not as widespread as it is right now, right? Because you're talking about something that happened 21 years ago, happened in 2001, and now we are in the year 2022. So that was a long time ago. And at that time, unfortunately, the internet was not as widespread as it is now. So there was not this level of, as I'm talking now about, campaigns to fight Islamophobia in cyberspace or Muslim women using the internet and social media in order to overcome Islamophobia and so on, and to overcome stereotypes against Islam and Muslims and Muslim women in particular. At that time, we saw the surge or the increase, right, in Islamophobia and Islamophobic attacks, but we did not actually see the kind of campaigns I'm talking about now in terms of using social media and digital media and cyberspace to bring about this kind of change and transformation as we are seeing it, because digital media and social media was not as widespread at that time. However, having said all of that, there was one good point that happened as a result of 9/11. And I always tell my students it was like a double-edged sword in the sense that on one hand, it increased Islamophobia and hatred to Islam and Muslims, but also on the other hand, subhanAllah, it had a positive effect. What was the positive effect? A lot of people started to become curious. They want to know what is Islam? Who are the Muslims, right? What is the Muslim world? What is the Arab world? What is the Middle East? So they started to also create centers for Middle Eastern studies and centers for Islamic studies. And people started to read more about Islam and Muslims more than ever before. And that in itself led some people to actually convert to Islam. Some of them started to embrace Islam. And even those who did not embrace Islam, they started to understand Islam and Muslims in a better way. So it was a double-edged sword. It had a negative side and it had a positive effect as well.
Another question. Do you think Muslim women are as effective as Muslim men in cyberspace?
I think they're starting to be. I would not say as effective. I would say they're starting to be. It's a process, like I said before. It's not going to happen between day and night. It's not going to happen immediately. I think when Muslim women feel passionate about a certain issue or feel passionate about a certain event, that's when they're really tempted to speak and to raise their voices. Like I gave some examples about, hashtag, can you hear us now? Or hashtag hands off my hijab. They definitely need to do more work in this area. I would say it's a good start. It's a good starting point. I would say definitely it's a good step in the right direction. But I would also say that much more work needs to be done and much more time and effort needs to be invested in this whole notion of Muslim women's activism in cyberspace, and giving them the platform and the ability and the potential to actually try to raise their voices even more and to become more active in cyberspace so that we can see more equality in terms of real life as well as online as well.
Excuse me, another question. Do you think Muslim women can be active in cyberspace while they preserve their Islamic values? Because some people say it's not possible for women to be active in cyberspace while they have hijab, something like this.
I believe in the notion of what is called Islamic feminism, and I have written about this before, Islamic feminism. Some people think that feminism is a bad word, it's terrible, it means that women are breaking away from their values, from their religion. This is wrong. Islamic feminism means that women can claim their own rights within an Islamic framework, within the framework of religious values and Islamic values. They can still be very active and effective in their societies on every level, whether in everyday life or whether even online and in digital media, social media, and in cyberspace. We definitely are seeing more voices of Muslim women being heard in cyberspace for sure. we are seeing more women sticking to their own values and holding on to their own values as Muslim women, while at the same time using cyberspace and using digital media to raise their voices. And the example of, for example, hashtag, hands off my hijab is just one example among many. Women are saying, this is my right to be a Muslim woman. It is my right to wear the hijab. It is my right to wear the niqab, whatever I want to wear. And you cannot just tell me that I cannot do that because I'm living in France or living in Switzerland or living in Denmark. That is completely wrong. So I think that it's sending a very strong message. And the message is, I'm holding to my identity, I'm holding to my own beliefs, and I'm using the digital media or social media as a way not to break away from my religion, but to actually protect my own religion and protect my own values and my beliefs as a Muslim woman. And I think we need to see more of that, especially with young generation and young women. Many of them are very technologically savvy. They're really clever with the internet. They're clever with social media. So maybe they can create more blogs, Facebook pages, posts, tweets, different postings on social media to defend their own values and what they stand for as Muslim women.
Question, please. How are women portrayed in cyberspace and in the Western media? And what is the difference between this image and the view of Islam and Quran?
Oh, there is a huge problem here. As I said at the very beginning of my talk, that unfortunately, Islam in general and Muslims in general, and then Muslim women in particular, have been the subject of a lot of attacks and a lot of criticisms and a lot of stereotypes and a lot of negative misperceptions of Islam and Muslims in general, but also Muslim women in particular have been subjected to a lot of these stereotypes, being seen as weak, vulnerable, they cannot speak for themselves, they are just powerless. Like we saw the example of Mrs. Ghazala Khan, when Trump says, oh, she was standing there, she was silent, maybe nobody is allowing her to speak. It is a very stereotypical, very Islamophobic, very sexist statement. Just because she's a Muslim woman wearing the hijab and she does not talk, does that mean that she is not allowed to talk? I mean, come on. So these are the types of things that we have to be aware of. And unfortunately, they're very much widespread. There's also the problem of, quote unquote, save the Muslim woman syndrome. Save the Muslim woman syndrome. A lot when I attend, for example, a lot of conferences or events in the West, people say things like, oh, so how can we help or support Muslim women? What can we do in order to support Muslim women? What can we do in order to save Muslim women? And I think that's also a problem, because when you talk about saving someone, that means you think that this someone is too weak, they cannot help themselves, therefore you have to come in and save them, right? So I call it the save the Muslim woman syndrome. And that's also equally dangerous, because in this case, you are not seeing them as powerful, as strong, as really capable of helping themselves. I always say you don't need to save anyone. You just need to understand everyone. You need to understand Islam and understand the Muslim culture and understand Muslim women in a good way, but don't think about, quote unquote, saving Muslim women, because I don't think this is a good approach or a good strategy either. So as you can see, we have a lot of work that still needs to be done using cyberspace and social media to really kind of amplify and raise our own voices and also clarify our own realities as Muslims in general and Muslim women in particular.
Thank you very much. Another question, Dr. Sahar Khamis. Maybe the Zoom will be disconnected after 40 minutes. I ask you to enter again the room, Zoom. Can you say about for our audiences and especially the people in Iran about your next and future researchers about this topic?
Yes, thank you so much. That's a great question. I think I'm doing a lot of writings and a lot of research right now on Muslim women's identities, Muslim women identities in cyberspace. So some of my future projects are also looking at, for example, how there's a digital gap. We call it the gender digital gap. Gender digital gap means the difference between the access to the internet and digital media and social media between men and women. Okay, so we cannot assume that everybody around the world has access to 24/7 high-speed internet all the time. This is wrong, because there are areas of the world that don't have 24/7 high-speed internet, And there is also the gender digital divide, which means that some women are not capable or able to use the internet because of lack of infrastructure, lack of technological savviness, lack of digital literacy, lack of all of these things together. So I did publish an article actually about this, which is called, the digital gap, the gender digital gap in terms of the pandemic or in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd be happy to share it with you. You can also share it with your students and your, your own faculty or your own institution or the Office of Islamic Studies in cyberspace. So this is something that I'm also working on right now, the gender digital gap, and also as it relates to the pandemic, as it relates to COVID-19, and how COVID-19 is actually increasing some of these digital gaps, including the gender digital gap. What kind of effect does that have on women and on Muslim women in particular? These are some of the research projects I'm working on right now and in the future as well.
Very good. As you said, the meeting, it can be last 1 hour, and our question finished. If you can to continue your lecture, it would be very good for us.
Yes, I can add a few points, and then we can end in the next 10 minutes or so, if that's okay with you. Okay? We don't have other questions. Okay. We don't have other questions, right? Yeah.
Again, can you repeat again?
Yeah, I'm saying that the questions, there are no more questions, but I can just give a few more points. That's right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So I think that my research agenda, because the last question you asked, I think is very important, about my research agenda and what I'm doing actually in terms of my own writing and research right now. Some of my work that deals with the gender digital gap, as I explained, especially the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on increasing this kind of digital gap in general and gender digital gap in particular. And I'd be happy to share some of my own research and some of my own writings with you and with the Office of Islamic Studies in cyberspace. You can share it with the students and with the, your own public or those who are interested in this kind of topic. Also, other research I'm doing, which is very important in this area, is understanding the notion of Islamic feminism. As I said before, this is a topic which is unfortunately not clearly understood and not really deeply understood. A lot of people think that Islam and feminism are two things that don't go together. You cannot mix and match them together, right? Just like Islam and democracy. There is this lack of understanding about concepts like Islam and democracy. Oh, you can either have Islam or you can have democracy. One Islamic cleric, a famous Islamic writer and scholar, said, if you think Islam and democracy don't go together, it means you neither understand Islam nor understand democracy, right? So the same thing could be said about Islamic feminism. If you think Islamic feminism, Islam and feminism do not go together, then it means you don't understand Islam and you don't understand feminism, right? So all of these terms and concepts, in my opinion, they need to be clearly understood by the public, and they need to be clearly understood not just by Westerners or non-Muslims. I would even say that Muslims themselves need to better understand these terms and these concepts. So the next time you meet someone who says Islam and democracy don't go together, or Islam and feminism don't go together, you will have an answer for this person or for these persons that, well, maybe you don't understand Islam and you don't understand these concepts clearly and deeply enough. Right? So we have to be able to have better education. In Muslim societies, we have a lot of resources. Let's face it, we have a lot of resources. Okay? I just came back from a trip to Turkey, and I'm like, people have resources. There are funds, there are universities, there are centers. We just need to have a number of important things, in my opinion. We need to have better unity. As Muslims, we are very fragmented, let's face it, and very divided among ourselves. And that's a very sad reality, unfortunately, right? Sunnis and Shiites and between the people in the same country and different regions and different countries and all of these conflicts. That makes us weak. It weakens us, right? So you need to have better unity. You need to have more coordination. You need to have better education. You need to have more resources, and you need to have vision and mission and planning. If we have all of these things in place, I think it would give a huge, empowerment to the Muslim communities, the 1.8 billion Muslims, and of course to Muslim women and Muslim women's causes and voices all over the world, to be able to amplify, right, these voices and to bring them to the rest of the world is a huge mission, right? So I think the Office of Islamic Studies in Cyberspace is doing a great job in terms of trying to start this kind of important initiative. I've been, monitoring and seeing some of the work that you've been doing in terms of trying to counter and to fight some of the negative aspects of cyberspace and some of the negative stereotypes about Islam and Muslims in cyberspace, and how can we possibly have a cyberspace which is friendly and which is actually capable of bringing about the voices of the Muslim world. So I think this is a great effort. I think it's a great initiative, and I certainly wish you a lot of success in that regard. I'm more than happy to help in any way I can as well. Thank you so much.
Very good. Once again, thank you for accepting our invitation and gracing the meeting, Dr. Khamis. I would like to request another meeting with you about the unity in cyberspace and its challenges, because you spoke about unity as well. So I should thank the participants as well. Thanks also to the viewers and the meeting participants who view us through the Hayat online website. More than 50 people attended the meeting through this website. And I hope you have benefited from the meeting. Please send us your comments and suggestions to our website and social networks, which is OISC-virtual.com. It should be noted that the certificate of this meeting will be given to the participant who provide for us a summary of this meeting in English, Arabic, or Persian, and the summary of the meeting should be sent to our Facebook account or my WhatsApp account until 24 hours after the meeting. My WhatsApp account is my number is 099191477564. To see the news of our future meetings, you can refer to our pages on social networks and our website. It was great to talk with you, Dr. Khamis, and all of the participants. I look forward to talk with you again soon, inshallah.
Thank you so much
very
for
much.
the invitation. I really appreciate it once again. And as I said, I'm going to be happy to share with you also some of my research articles and studies that I hope you're going to be able to share with the participants and with whoever is interested really in these topics. Thank you so much once again, and salam alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Fi aman Allah.
Fi aman Allah.